When I look back on the summer when everything changed, I realize how many little details I missed. Small signs that were warning me of the storm that was about to shake my home and my heart. My name is Claire. I was 39 years old at the time, and I was married to a man named Michael. He was kind in his own way, but distant. Our marriage had been more about stability than passion for a long time. We lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where every lawn was trimmed, every family waved politely, and behind closed doors, everyone was fighting their own battles. Michael had a son from his first marriage, a 21-year-old named Daniel. He had been living on his college campus most of the year, but when summer rolled around, he came back home. At first, it felt strange. He wasn't a child anymore. He was tall, athletic, and carried himself with the kind of confidence that only comes with youth. But under that confidence, I could sense something softer, loneliness maybe. I welcomed him warmly, partly out of obligation as a stepmother, but also because there was a warmth in him that was missing from my marriage. Michael worked long hours. He left early in the morning and often returned late at night, exhausted. Our marriage had settled into a rhythm of polite conversations, dinners in silence, and separate routines. I told myself this was normal, but when Daniel came back, his presence disrupted that rhythm. Suddenly, the house felt alive. He helped me cook sometimes, teased me about my taste in music, and stayed up late watching movies in the living room. One night, after Michael had fallen asleep on the couch as he often did, Daniel and I stayed up finishing a film. When it ended, we lingered, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about his classes, his frustrations, his dreams. I listened, genuinely interested, something I hadn't felt in years with my husband. There was no line crossed, nothing inappropriate. But when I finally excused myself to bed, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, seen. That's how it began, small moments that seemed harmless. But small moments can grow heavy with meaning. A brush of hands when passing dishes, laughter that lingered too long, eye contact that burned a little more than it should. I tried to ignore it. I reminded myself I was his stepmother, I was married, I had responsibilities. But the more I resisted, the more obvious it became that I was fighting myself. One night, everything changed. It was late, past midnight, and I was in bed reading. Michael had gone on a business trip for a few days, leaving just me and Daniel at home. I heard a soft knock on my bedroom door, and before I could answer, it opened slightly. Daniel peeked in, looking sheepish. "Sorry," he whispered. "I didn't mean to wake you. I just couldn't sleep." I told him it was fine, that he could come in for a bit. He sat on the edge of the bed, and we talked in low voices. The house was so quiet, it felt like we were in a bubble, just the two of us. After a while, the silence grew heavy, and I realized how close he was sitting. I told him he should get some rest, but instead of leaving, he leaned back against the headboard like he belonged there. I felt my heart race in a way it hadn't in years. Nothing dramatic happened that night. No sudden confessions, no reckless actions. But something far more dangerous did. We crossed an invisible line in our hearts. He fell asleep there, beside me, his presence warm and steady, while I lay awake, torn between guilt and desire. By morning, he was gone, back in his own room, but the memory of it stayed burned into my mind. Over the next weeks, that unspoken connection grew stronger. I found myself waiting for moments alone with him, dressing more carefully, feeling both shame and excitement. He, too, seemed drawn to me in ways that were impossible to ignore. One evening, as we were washing dishes together, his hand brushed mine and lingered. I looked up at him, and the air between us seemed to thicken. For a moment, it felt inevitable, like the universe had conspired to put us here. But then reality would crash in. Michael. Marriage vows. The consequences of betrayal. I told myself over and over that I couldn't let this happen. Yet the harder I fought, the closer we became. He'd come into my room late at night, sometimes under the excuse of needing to talk, sometimes just to sit quietly. Those nights were the most dangerous because silence often says more than words. The breaking point came during a thunderstorm. Michael was away again, and the house shook with thunder. I've always hated storms, and Daniel knew it. When the power flickered and the lights went out, I heard footsteps in the hall, then a soft knock at my door. He came in without waiting for an answer, holding a flashlight. "Just wanted to check if you're okay," he said. I tried to smile, but my nerves betrayed me. He sat with me on the bed, close enough that I could feel the heat of his skin. The storm outside raged, but the real storm was inside me. That night, we didn't just sit side by side. He reached for my hand, and I didn't pull away. We stayed like that for hours, holding on to each other as if the thunder might tear the world apart. Nothing physical happened beyond that, but it was enough to know we had gone too far emotionally. In the weeks that followed, guilt gnawed at me. I started avoiding him, pulling back, trying to convince myself that it was just a phase, that I could bury it and move on. But he noticed. One evening, he confronted me gently. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked. His voice was soft, but his eyes held mine, searching for answers I couldn't give. I wanted to tell him everything, but instead I said, "No, you didn't do anything wrong. I just need some space." He nodded, but I saw the hurt flicker across his face. That night, he didn't come to my room, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the emptiness of his absence. When Michael finally returned from his trips and began spending more time at home, things shifted. Daniel grew quieter, retreating into himself, and I tried to focus on my marriage. But the truth was, my marriage was already broken long before Daniel entered the picture. His presence just exposed the cracks that had been there all along. Eventually, Daniel went back to college. The day he left, he hugged me goodbye a little longer than he should have, and in that embrace, I felt all the unspoken words between us. We never acted on the feelings, never crossed the final line, but in some ways, what we shared was even more dangerous. We carried a secret bond, a forbidden connection that could never be spoken of. Now, years later, I sometimes replay those nights in my mind. The storm, the late-night talks, the way he looked at me as if I were someone worth seeing. I know it was wrong, and I know nothing good could have come from it if we had gone further. But it changed me. It made me realize how lonely I had been, how much of myself I had given up in a marriage that no longer gave me life. This is my story of infidelity, not through physical betrayal, but through the heart. My stepson came into my room while I was sleeping, and we never became what temptation urged us to be. But in our silence, in our closeness, we betrayed the man who trusted us both. And that is a weight I will carry forever.